Hello, welcome to the first episode of the Network First Future of Work series from Silicon Valley. We got here Shujaat Ahmad. I'm Francisco Marin, and we're very excited to be kicking off this series. They're sponsored by DCH and Cognitive Talent Solutions with the support of Italic Production as well on the production. And really excited to be here today with you, Shujaat. My name is Francisco Marin. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Cognitive Talent Solutions. We are an organizational network analysis vendor based in Palo Alto. We are here today in downtown Palo Alto. We got our iPad, our matcha, our Labradorite, got all we need. So maybe, Shujaat, why don't we start introducing yourself, right, and helping our audience understand better your background. I've known you for a number of years now, right? I think the first time that I interacted with you was during the pandemic, where you're working at LinkedIn still, right? And then we've been participating in a number of events together with the People Analytics Society, right? The Network First Manifesto, and now in this series. So, let's start with your background, introducing yourself.
Well, thank you for having me here, and I'm very excited to be here. Background, so I've been a corporate anomaly for 2 decades, right? Different domains, different functions, industries, from oil and gas refining to supply chain to strategy consulting, and then did a radical mid-career pivot where I was like, okay, I've become employable, but I want to do something for people. And that's when a decade ago I shifted towards, I want to go do something in talent, and where can I help people and have a seat at the table where I can convince business leaders that if you do well with talent, it's good for business, but also be a secret activist there, that how can I help make lives better for people through work. And then at LinkedIn is where I found myself, grew myself in this space in people analytics. Then when you and I met, I had then conceived and then led this very unique team on future work, both at the start of the pandemic, then post-pandemic, looking at how do we make distributed work better, how do we think about AI, how do we think about solving for productivity, innovation, and culture in where this future work is headed. And I've been now an entrepreneur myself, just like you, left over a year ago. And I'm on a mission to how do we make future work more focused on human prosperity, not just profit alone, and look at underestimated leaders at work, underestimated professionals at work, and skill them to think of AI for purpose, and can they use it for both business and societal outcomes, first with themselves and then also for what they're delivering for others. So very excited to be here on this topic with you.
Thank you. And one of the things that I love about you from the very beginning is how passionate you are about networks, about social capital. I know at LinkedIn, you were part of the pilot zero at Microsoft Viva, right? And you were also working on a number of projects related to social capital. So I really wanted you to be the speaker that kicks off this series, because I find that you have a very unique combination of subject matter expertise with passion. I see that when you speak, you care about the topics that you cover, and that's very rare to find nowadays, because some thought leaders, they have a lot of subject matter expertise, but they are not able to explain it in a way that resonates with a wider audience. There are other thought leaders that they are very passionate, but they don't have that much substance. But in your case, you have that rare combination of subject matter expertise on the future of work, people analytics, diversity and inclusion, right? With that natural passion and energy that you bring to all the events that we are together. And I agree with you. I think that we both share that perspective where both of us have spent some time in corporate environments. In my case, I used to work at IBM for 5 years as a business analytics leader, right? And I've been with Cognitive Talent Solutions for 6 years now. In your case also, you started at LinkedIn and now you are an entrepreneur with Belong and Lead, right? So do you want to talk a little bit about that new company as well, that new project?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for the kind words. I think the feelings are mutual. I think maybe it has something to do with the way both of us look and our cultural backgrounds. We bring a lot of passion, right? So you'll see me a lot of talking with my hands. So Belong and Lead, we originally started, so as you know, I teach DEI or whatever the word is right now. analytics as my night job, and I used to teach it at Wharton as well, to the MBAs as well.
Okay.
And then so I was doing that as a side gig while being in corporate, but also figuring, okay, where do I want to go next? So once I left corporate, I was like, okay, let's look at the bigger picture. So my vision for the company has been, how do we make future work a platform to build purposeful lives, not just resumes? And in that process, can we fuel a more purposeful society? And so that was the vision. Like, okay, but what's the mission right now? Where are the different microwaves happening in society? So one of them was this cultural pushback around diversity. Globally, when we think about, who are we championing? Those who have been written off by the system and by the workplace. Number two, this distrust between employee and the employer, with the way what we're seeing with layoffs, with return to office, with just a political uncertainty as well. And third one was with, we had already seen distributed work with the pandemic, AI coming in. And I felt all these three collide for the right opportunity and the right mission to fuel that vision, right? And so the mission is skilling people who are generally underestimated on AI in a way that they can stay relevant, right, in the future, because companies are not really going to skill them. And then for them to embrace where this future work is headed, can they create opportunity for themselves, create purpose for themselves, and then also create purpose for others. So one segment is around skilling. We have one section where we're doing just education around changing the way media is talking about future work and AI without being connected to the incentives of what companies want them to be talking about. And then the third is around building products using AI so we can help individuals fulfill that, right, and become more effective in the work that they do.
Very cool. So it's about skills, about purpose, and about how we set the right incentives as we navigate to this new future of work. I want to link all this to really the concept of the network first future of work, because you and I have talked about this topic in a variety of events, right? But many of the people in the audience might not be as familiar with it, right? So maybe I'm going to explain what it means for me, and I would love to, because it can mean like different things for different people, right? For me, the way I look at the network first future of work is, nowadays, when people go to work to a traditional job, you got an immediate supervisor that tells you what you have to work on, who you have to work with, and where you have to work and when you have to work. So it's a model that to some extent, it's grounded on the underlying principle of collaborative control. Unfortunately, it's the most efficient framework we have at the moment, maybe, but it's not a setup that really incentivizes people to express themselves with the highest possible level of authenticity. So the question here is, right now we have a context where with the advent of AI and eventually AGI, we know that kind of like the traditional work setup is kind of like being dismantled in front of our eyes. We know that we are navigating towards something new. We are not sure what that's about. But the question here is like, now is the right moment to have a conversation about how we can create a better system that set the right incentives and address some of the challenges that we have with the current model. And the way that we define that new model is the network first future of work. What does it mean to me? To me, a network first future of work is a model that incentivizes people to work with people that resonate with them, to work on areas that they are passionate about, and having greater freedom over their time and location of their work. So going from collaborative control to collaborative freedom, right? Now, where do we experience collaborative freedom nowadays? You can experience it if you have a great boss in a multinational that really empowers you to work on the projects that you like with people that you like, but that's very rare, unfortunately, right? Or when you open your own company, at least in the early stages, you experience a certain degree of collaborative freedom, or when you work as a freelancer, but then you face a completely different set of challenges, right? So the question here a little bit is, how can we replicate some of that magic, that synergy that we see in small companies at scale in large organizations, especially as the new generations, Gen Z, Gen Alpha are coming in and they're saying like, well, actually, I don't kind of like buy into the traditional, dream that you have been selling to me, right? So how can we create something that is more appealing and that is more organic and sets the right incentives. What does a network first future of work mean to you?
Wow. Okay. Loaded question. And yeah, especially for Gen Z, Gen Alpha. I mean, I have two Gen Alpha, Gen Beta, and they definitely don't want to listen to their parents, let alone coming at work and looking at a manager to listen to. So I will let me hit three areas. So I think there's a hierarchical structure that we all have, at least over the last century, used to, and that structure is focused on whoever is in the right position and power gets to decide.
Yeah.
Right? And as we moved into more and more information and people getting more agency and autonomy, as with the advent of internet and now with like AI as well, network first is about finding who has the right information and insight in a company and having them to decide, make decisions, both at the micro level and then even at the macro level, at least being the recommenders for decisions to move. And these are not like one or the other. Since the advent of time, what we've seen is where people have succeeded, either as individuals and then as they've galvanized others towards a cause, it's been the use of networks. With technology now, it has become very easy to find people and study networks, right? So I think right now we're at a point where AI, there's a cost of speed and coordination that comes in a hierarchy, because you have to bubble up, package everything up, and it's slow information, and it's mostly the wrong information as well, right? So I'll give an example. When I started in manufacturing, one of our senior directors, this was back in Procter & Gamble, he said, when you see on the manufacturing line, you see this bottle and you realize that the bottle has a defect. It can't go to a customer. You tell your boss, the boss tells their boss, that says, we feel like there's an issue with the bottle, we need to reevaluate our batch. He's like, by the time it comes to me, they tell me, we found a minor issue with the bottle, it'll be fixed by next week, don't need to worry about it. And he's like, but this issue could have caused a massive issue for us as a company. And that's in the hierarchical structure. I think we've now gone to, over the last 10, 15 years, as tech companies have evolved and technology has evolved, faster decision making. And that faster decision making is based on who in the company has the right information and do they have the autonomy at their point of location to make a decision before it bubbles into a big problem, right? The struggle is that we are still tuned to that hierarchical structure, right? You take companies have these frameworks like a rapid framework or a racy framework where the person at the top has to make a decision. Now that's good for certain types of decisions. But if you have to escalate everything for every possible decision, you're not going to go fast, right? So take as an example, the pandemic. There are hospitals that were very hierarchical, and it took them 6 weeks to figure out telehealth. And then there were like smaller, under-resourced hospitals, but they had people who were connected with others in the network. They were able to do it within 6 days. Because the information flow was fast, there was less bureaucracy. Where I see this now is for two reasons. One, from the purpose of, does it drive people to have more prosperity? And number two, is it the prerequisite for as we're going with AI? So I think from a purpose perspective, it gives you it enables you to have more flexible working lifestyle if we want to embrace this network style. You also get better accountability, because if you're good as a subject matter expert and people know that you are being valued for that versus trying to play a game in a hierarchical structure, so you're less performative, you're being valued for what the skill that you bring in. You can do it with one employer, or you can go out be a gig worker right now, where it's become normalized that you have, both you and I are scaling our businesses based on this network approach, right? Where we can find people who are experts. And those communities also, people are like, we don't want a full-time job. We just want to be part of you for this specific mission. We will jump in and then we'll move on. And so being able to run that network, it drives a lot of purpose for many people rather than being stuck in the constraints that come within a hierarchical structure. For the company, what is beneficial is, right now, if you think about AI, a lot of the AI is about what will happen to the individual. Versus it should be like, okay, can we reduce this bureaucracy that comes in a hierarchical structure? And AI helps us find the right people in the networks, connects them, coordinates them for a project, right, or for a cause, and then gives them their fair sort of compensation for it as well, and values them accordingly. I think that is the key for AI to be successful. If you want to do
that's
AI,
definitely that's something I want to touch on, and I want to quickly expand because we cover so many interesting stuff. First, the connection between the transition from a hierarchical to a network model having to do with the focus on more legacy industries like manufacturing versus focus on software and artificial intelligence, right? I completely agree with you, and I used to be a Lean Six Sigma black belt at IBM, right? So that's how I got into people analytics, actually. And it's very interesting when you get the formation, right, on concepts like defects per minute, right, and kind of value stream maps, and looking at processes as something that is very structured, and then how you go from that to agile methodologies, which in the end, agile methodologies are really drinking from lean and the concept of Gemba and involving the people, in the lower layers of the organization in the innovation process, right? That's what all this is coming from. So I think we can agree that there is a historical context here, right? I mean, maybe first with the concept of the flat hierarchy, then with the advent of agile methodologies, which were somehow successful, right? I mean, and what we're trying to do with the Network First Manifesto here to some extent resembles or replicates what was done in 2001 with the Agile Manifesto, right? Kind of advocating for a new way of working. But I found that the Agile methodologies brought some very decentralized notions like servant leadership, the concept of squads, the concept of guilds, right? But because it was a purely decentralized method that was, implemented in a very hierarchical setup, it didn't stack completely, right? But it has kind of changed definitely the standards, especially for software development, and the concept of that you have to iterate fast enough and expose the solution to the client so that it can be enough iterated by the time that is deployed. But then going back to the because I wanted to talk to you as well about people analytics, but let's talk about that intersection of networks and AI, right? Because ultimately AI amplifies any framework that it touches, right? I love there was a sentence from a professor in Stanford that said that AI can define anything. The question is, so AI can automate anything that we can define. The question is, what can we define, right? And the idea here is can we articulate a new framework for the organization that then AI can amplify in a way that sets the right incentives? Right now, we focus a lot on human capital metrics, not that much on social capital metrics. Maybe do we want to add the definition of human capital versus social capital for the audience as well?
Yeah, and you touched something interesting. There's an evolution, as you talked about, hierarchical to network. I think humans will figure out a way to screw up anything, even more so in corporate, definitely. So as they scale more, I think the one line I would put in is the hierarchical is about authority defines decision making and leadership, and in network it's information and insights defines decision making and leadership, right? And both have different incentives. And the example you gave about agile, I think it comes back to if you don't have the culture and the leadership top-down vision for what we want to do, right? The rest are just mediums, right? And formats for where to go. So when you talk about AI, right? AI can just run any framework. I think there's a 2 levels higher question. What is it that you want to achieve? And then how you want to achieve there? Do you have the culture for it? So you can set up agile, but if the culture isn't set up for decentralized decision making, right? It is still held by few people who have the decision rights. Agile won't work. It's just a different way of organizing teams, right? But if you give it the right culture for people to work, they will become self-governing, self-autonomous. They will create opportunities for you. And I think same thing with AI is like you can give AI a framework, but at the end of the day, if someone sits in a boardroom and says, I will make a decision what it can and can't do, you just are sub-optimizing yourself. But if you put an AI for a network-oriented organization that also has the culture that they can operate with autonomy, and also has the incentives top-down that we want you to go, take risks, experiment, make a decision. So, for example, Southwest may get like a bad rap right now. I don't know where they are right now, but when one of the keys to success was you have the same person who is checking you in, the same person who's boarding you as well, and that person had the decision rights to make a change about your ticket if you wanted to, give you something extra if they wanted to, right? Because without that, their just-in-time lean operation would not work. So they said we need to have that culture. They can't go and call someone because the more time they're spending that, right, it doesn't work for our quick turnover for the planes. So same thing here, like the culture has to be set, right? And on the second question around human capital versus social capital, I think fascinating point, because I think
let's give a definition of what is human capital and social capital.
Like what is the definition, right? So human capital metrics so I'll step back from it, right? If you ask a company, said, hey, I want to figure out my human capital metrics. If they haven't really thought about people as enablers of competitive advantage, those who enable productivity, innovation, they bring the culture together as well, then what you're going to look at are traditional human capital metrics, which is headcount, attrition, right? Just the fact that
and even at individual level, right? Like observable attributes that employees have, like for example, years of service, traditional performance, academic background, age,
exactly,
gender, etc. Right?
Absolutely. So think of it as like the government does a census on you, right? So a company does a census on you because you're part of the company, and in the system they have some information about you. They're like, that's the most available information. Let's make that our human capital metrics, and hopefully think that will help us improve what it is for people, right? Mm-hmm. These are just descriptive metrics.
But they're just part of the picture, right? How does that compare to social capital metrics?
Exactly.
Then?
So social capital is, okay, you've brought people together. Why you want people in different teams, so let's say collaborate, or within a same team want to collaborate. So you want to figure out that what is the social capital people bring that they make everyone else become better, because, so that's one aspect of social capital. What is the way the team is organized that makes a specific individual become better at their outcome, right? So that's where social capital comes in. How do they connect? How do they collaborate? I think those are like the two key ones. Where human capital comes in, it sort of gives you it's a covariate, right? So I'll get technical, but it gives you different nuances to it. So for instance, let's say diversity. If how someone who is like the highest level in an organization connects with 2-3 layers down, right? That is a social capital, right? How frequently they connect, how much visibility you have in the meetings as well. Now, when you connect human capital metrics, number one, you're like, okay, performance ratings. Do performance rating have an impact based on how frequently someone got exposure to the hippo, the highest paid individual in the room who decides compensation and performance ratings? On top of it, you add, well, does it have a difference if you are remote versus in person? Does proximity create an impact? Does it make a difference if you happen to be from an underrepresented background, you're female, right? Versus like whatever is the majority in that organization. And you start, the blending of these two give you the power to figure out, are we creating the right environment for people to perform to their best? Are we making sure that we're equitable and figuring out whoever really brings value from a social capital perspective is being valued for it? And there's minimal biases accordingly. And then are we creating the right incentives for people to connect and collaborate? Versus if you just had human capital metrics, what are you doing? What's the incentive? There's nothing. All you're doing is a rating that you gave someone, and you're now reviewing it yourself and saying, oh, these are my top performers. Yeah, you're the one who assigned them. Versus social capital, what it does is tells you, if you think the real value creation is through connectivity and collaboration, information flow, right? You could be, I'm wearing this t-shirt because network isn't just about extroverts, right? It's introverts, but introverts need to be more intentional on how they create networks. If you're looking at who is maybe an expert, doesn't connect with everyone, but is the sought after person and provides the right information to everyone. You set up the incentive for you to share information, for you to connect with people, right? For you to collaborate with others as well. That is what social capital does. If you just have human capital, it's pointless. If you just have social capital, but don't have human capital, you can't really unlock the power of social capital, right? But both need to be connected.
That makes a lot of sense. So recapping, basically, we got human capital, years of service, experience, gender, age, right? Observable attributes, right? Most decision-making processes have traditionally relied almost exclusively on human capital metrics, promotions, rewards, hiring process. And now the question is, how can we balance that with social capital metrics that represent the network of connections that you create in the organization, basically who you share information with, who you inspire, who goes to you when they need personal support, technical support, right? And it's about balancing the two of them. Another question, so I wanted to bridge this with, first with organizational network analysis and then with the overall state of the people analytics function and the role that people analytics practitioners play in shaping that future of work, right? Because networks and people analytics, a key tool here is organizational network analysis. We're both very familiar with ONA, right? Let's give also a first definition. So ONA is basically a people analytics method that allows you to analyze and visualize how people interact with each other in an organization. There is active ONA based on online surveys. There is passive ONA based on analysis of metadata from email, calendar, which typically is done at aggregate level with analyzing the content of the communications. But the question here is like, okay, ONA was supposed to be that tool that would somehow enable the inclusion of social capital metrics. It hasn't really been adopted at mainstream level, and there has been already, there is an article on ONA from Harvard from 1993, the I think it's called the org behind the chart, right? Yeah. So, okay, we have been talking about this since 1993 or even earlier. Why isn't this utilized now everywhere, right? And is this the solution, or is this just part of the solution together with AI? What are your thoughts on that? What are your experiences with ONA and the role that it plays in this?
So I'm glad you mentioned the chart because I forgot about it earlier. It's like, when you said human capital versus social capital, human capital is what you see on a chart. If your company has organizational charts, not every company has them. But we know work doesn't happen on the org charts, right? Normally, you make decision of layoffs or hiring or who gets more heads based on an org chart. Actual work happens in social capital. So social capital that figures out how work really happens, right? Versus the chart. ONA is an interesting one. I used to have when ONA got a lot of hype, right? When I joined People Analytics, every conference you would go to, everyone would have to say something around ONA. And I wrote like a hashtag on our team board and it said, OMG before ONA. Which was that we are in the business of myth busting and in decision science. And our goal is to have business leaders hopefully make the right decision or confuse them enough that they avoid the wrong decision if they're intending on making it. And I said, if you can question assumptions and myth bust, get them to say, oh my God, what were we thinking? We had no idea that this is how we thought about human capital, this different way of thinking it. Then bring ONA, because right now they haven't even thought about, what we should do about attrition, engagement, development. And when you throw in a heavy term like ONA, that even the people analytics practitioner can't explain most of the time, because people analytics still is a nascent
So like a
field.
next level of complexity, right? When still we haven't really integrated social capital in the conversations about culture and the organization itself.
And to be honest,
that's a good point.
The business leaders don't even care, right? Because a lot of the time they think that they can manage a business, they're really good at people as well, which is fine. No one's really thought of like, hey, can someone give me advice, right? Around, I've led a team, can someone give me advice on how to catch my biases there? Very few are into it, right? They're mostly looking for the data that they can't see because legal said you can't see this data, right? And then I think why it hasn't taken off is, I think there are two categories of people analytics, which is like PA. Every time we say is a PA team. I think there's the first PA, which, I think is majority. They are the pretend analytics. And then there's the very few are the actual people analytics.
I never heard that one.
Okay.
That's so fun.
Right? So the pretend analytics is where we go in and you talk at conferences about my company does X, Y, and Z, and we're doing, employee engagement listing. End of the day, you're basically insurance underwriters for decision making for leaders. And when they say, hey, I need to get rid of X, or I need to make a certain decision, you have the data, go prove that this is the right thing. And they're generally playing in the human capital space, metric space, descriptive data, packaging it up. They came in from IO psychology background, strategy background, consulting background, analytics, and now they have to showcase that we're doing something really advanced. So let me just package it this way, right? We've been to conferences where people showcase their projects and we're like, let's dig deeper. When you dig deeper, you're like, there's nothing in there. The real people analytics were people as a leader who came in and said, I want to do something around, yes, I need to answer to a business decision, but I also want to be the voice that says, you can take a different direction because longer term, these people are going to help you. You can either choose to, for example, with AI right now, say, I can deploy AI in a customer service team and get rid of a lot of the customer service folks. Or what if you use AI for the customer service folks to have more meaningful work, more deeper connection with the customer, capture more insights from them. You'll have a happier customer, more happier employees, and you may be able to upsell things based on that. That comes from actually going and doing proper employee listening, organizational network analytics, tying it back to outcomes of customer service. But what happens is we're like, no, we'll deploy AI, here's how many heads we can cut and we can justify. So I think the real people analytics is, and there are very few who start off as purposeful leaders that we want to take our skill sets that we had from the business or from whatever we had learned, and we want to deploy it on the people side, help the business, but in the same way help the people side as well, knowing that there's going to be a conflict, right? If you think about an executive team, a CFO, a CEO, right? And then whoever else comes in, like CHR, CMO, there's always a conflict, right? Like the CFO is not going to go in for what the CMO is going to target for, right? They're going to go for the most conservative topic, right? And you have to convince them why do they need to expand the business. Same thing with the CHRO. So I think the people analytics serving the CHRO has to be like, you are on a conflict that how can you still manage cost, still manage the upside, but also don't break your future potential to innovate by making a wrong decision on people. There are very few who then able to build this team, build like people who come from, who can run ONA, who can run employee listening, who can connect both of them, who can also be really good strategic advisors to the business that when they're trying to make a wrong decision, they tell them, hold on, what if we gave you something else, right? And you sort of build that relationship with them. So, for example, when you and I used to chat, right, and we would talk about, is there a ideal people analytics person? And I was to advise other companies as well. That's a unicorn. There's no ideal people analytics professional. There is an ideal
Could it be somebody that has business acumen and technical background?
Absolutely. But there is an ideal people analytics team. And I like to believe we created one as well, which is like that team is a combination of, again, it's a network, but it's a combination of communications, IO psychology, a commitment to doing something good for people, right? They can analyze, if they can analyze, they're willing to learn. Someone who has really good stakeholder management capabilities hurting the cats, and someone who's willing to be disruptive and say, I'm not here to be subservient. I'm here to listen diplomatically, but also push an agenda, right? You won't find that in one person, but you can build a team and then a right leader who says, at some point, I got to push and pull these strings of this network of people I've brought in, give them autonomy, but say, where do we myth bust? So because of that, O&A has been very little, right? O&A has been it's been a nice science project for a lot of companies. They brought vendors in, and they haven't tied it to outcomes.
Correct.
Same way, because the people analytics team.
That's where the AI agents maybe can make a difference.
Exactly,
right?
and the people analytics team as well coming in is not tying to outcomes, right? The outcomes is tying to is human capital metrics, whereas the outcome, I think, are three. Three for the timing, because if I convolute them, it gets confusing for business leaders, but it is productivity, innovation, and culture. And I think productivity and innovation are misunderstood. If we're sitting in Silicon Valley, I've done this research where we went and asked everyone about innovation, looked at books as well, asked leaders. They can't define what innovation is, right? Mostly innovation is a team that has been given, tasked with, to do the next unique thing. If they produce it, they're productive, they term to be innovative.
That reminds me, like, for a period of time, companies were thinking, what does it mean to work on people analytics? Well, it means to have a team that is called people analytics, a check, and that's it. Yeah. I'm doing people analytics. Right?
Oh, I would even argue, I think like the human resources name needs to go away, right? If you design something from scratch right now, right, and you basically were somewhere lost, sleeping in a cave, woke up, had all the information of the world with AI, you were not married to the old structures, and someone came to you, you're a founder, and says, yeah, you need to have a team called human resources. You're like, what does human resources give me? They're like, oh, compliance, legal, all of that, great, but what else do they give me for what I'm building? The name itself is wrong. The name of any function, I believe, should be tied to the value they bring. So if you're human resources and people analytics, you will be treated to bring me the data, not even analytics, on people, and you, whenever I need to have issue with my resource, I'm going to reach out to you. Versus it should be, right now, for a company that is dependent on talent, you should be the key transformation person for, hey, I enable productivity, I enable innovation, I enable culture. If you don't want to do that, you can call yourself, I'm the team effectiveness, organizational effectiveness, individual effectiveness team tied to some outcome, right? If I'm sitting in sales, I'm here to give you the effectiveness on tying it back to sales quota while keeping top talent with you and not going to a competitor. The name has to change. I think so. That's why I think the PA, the real PA, is a dying breed. But the flip side is, I think now with AI coming in, they are the most sort of thoughtful, powerful, skilled individuals who should actually be leading your AI charge.
I agree with that. And it's nice to see actually some new roles combining people analytics and AI together. I saw a role like that at ServiceNow recently at executive level with Brandon. But so I think we have established here that people analytics professionals, in principle, they should play a critical role in enabling that transition to a network-first future of work that balances human capital metrics with social capital metrics. Part of that is the adoption of O&A, but there is a wider conversation about basically culture, innovation, and you've touched something very interesting, that is that people analytics being within the HR function versus reporting to other parts of the organization, right? Because originally people analytics was HR analytics. Then it changed to people analytics. Some people analytics team nowadays are reporting to operations. Do you think that somehow impacts the ability of PA teams to create an impact, whether they're reporting to the HR function or to the operations function? And how does the future of the people analytics function look like? Do you see it as a centralized function? Do you see it scattered across the organization at department level? What needs to happen for people analytics teams to really start delivering real value aligned with strategic imperatives and documenting that impact? And what's the role of AI agents in that?
Interesting. You know, by the way, after this discussion, right, I'll be cancelled by the entire PA.
No worries, we'll cut out the
No,
parts
don't
we don't
cut
like.
out, but publish it. But after that, we'll track how many have cancelled me. You know, how many have unconnected on LinkedIn.
We're being good. I mean, like
Yeah.
you say, our conversation are much
This
more.
is our conversation. No, it's funny. So the glad thing is I've been very bold. I actually did a post on pretend analytics once, and people from PA, our groups, have been reaching out and saying we love the bold take because I think that's where we're going. I think so. There are three things. Number one, the single point of failure or success for a PA team is a good or bad CHRO. Okay. If the CHRO or Chief People Officer, Chief Talent Officer, if they are not willing to fight and not willing to go in and see that their role is not to be subservient, their role is to push for change and using analytics. They're sitting, especially in tech, they're sitting with the C-suite, they're all are talking about data. CHR is always trying to prove their worth, right, in that conversation. They can't be the expert on business strategy. They can't be the expert on tech. They can be the expert on people that enables that. And people analytics is their secret sauce. But if you have a very weak CHRO, Chief People Officer, Chief Talent Officer, does not matter how good of a people analytics team or how good of a HR team you have in general. So I think number one there. I think that role is in jeopardy now. Because if you think about AI transformation, and we are going to go to the next decade of a painful transformation, and then we'll understand what we did wrong, and then probably we'll go through a real transformation. The CEO, CFO, who in the C-suite can actually lead transformation, who knows the people side, who knows what will take on the behavioral science when you deploy AI with humans, who has the data, they would be really well informed on people analytics, right? Or there's someone who's generally run a general manager in a business, which is mostly the COO or someone who leads sales. You will already start to see the COO stepping in and saying the CHRO just reports to me. Because the third powerful person in that C-suite is going to be whoever leads the transformation. And do you think the CHRO is going to be tasked with to be the Chief Transformation Officer? I don't think so. You've already had few companies change their role to say we have Chief Transformation Officer, and they're not necessarily HR folks. So I think that's one where the CHRO is in jeopardy, where they might actually report under a CEO. Second point you raise, okay, that is the future. Have we seen the implications? Absolutely. You see any people analytics or HR team that goes under the CFO, completely different metrics. It becomes about, hey, I need office space utilization versus I want to solve for people engagement.
I love the setup that Emerson Paes has as Roche, for example. Is kind of like the only organization that I've seen that has an executive role on networks, and he's doing amazing work, activating Google Spaces for project management in a completely centralized manner across the organization. So magic happens when you create people analytics roles within the operations department that have greater freedom to create value for business. So there is something there that should be considered definitely. And the other thing as well, I wanted people in the audience to have kind of like a realistic overview of how these AI agents are going to impact these operations. Because one thing I noticed, we are in Silicon Valley, here in Silicon Valley, we're in our own bubble. We talk every day about AI agents, but then when I talk with somebody like in Spain, in France, in Germany, I think, oh, well, they've heard about generative AI, but the concept of AI agent is not really there yet. And we had this recent event with the People Analytics Society where, we were explaining the difference between agentic AI and an AI agent. But I love to explain it with actual use case, right? And this ties to the concept of O&A. And I think that the future of O&A really is kind of like to be embedded in the mainstream vendors like ServiceNow, Workday, SAP, Google, right? And that's where it will have like a more mainstream adoption. But let's, for example, put the example of the onboarding, rethinking onboarding as social activation, right? So right now the way it looks is you join an organization, right? And you join a team, If you're lucky, you get a buddy that is assigned to you somehow on the spot, right? If you're lucky, that's a person that is going to help you, show you the ropes, teach you the processes, welcome you. If you have bad luck, maybe that's a person that is thinking about leaving the organization, a person that is not really engaged or that is not really interested in you having a short time to productivity, right? So it's really about luck sometimes. You got a good buddy, you got a good boss, and that determines your career in the organization to some extent. But how do AI agents together with social capital rethink this? So the idea here is that you join the organization, the AI agent would determine who's the best person to be your buddy or mentor, right? Based on the level of informal leadership that has been measured through, active or passive O&A, based on human capital metrics like department, performance, and then the AI would gather the consent of that buddy, informing the first liner. If the buddy provides the consent to be your buddy, basically, the AI will make an email introduction, so you get to know each other, then would schedule a meeting based on your availability, document that the meeting took place, and then assess the impact that that intervention had in terms of shortening your time to productivity as a new hire in the organization. So it's kind of like a completely automated process that already embeds human capital and social capital metrics, and they can be implemented at scale. I think for me, that's the future. Like this, we have 7, 8 different use cases, right? For change management, leadership development, organizational effectiveness. But it's the concept of these AI agents deploying these micro-interventions at scale in a way that is embedded into the structure of the organization. And maybe that's how the future organization looks like, right? It's a network run by AI agents where all of us can combine our individual identity as entrepreneurs with our collective identity as members of a group, but starting from the point where you feel aligned with the purpose of the organization, right? But I think we are starting to see the baby steps going towards that reality, and I don't see any other function that is better positioned than people analytics to enable that, really. But I think part of that is the technology has to be there, the institutional support has to be there, people analytics has to find its way into the organization, whether it is in the, supported by the CHRO or supported by the COO. But I think, we have kind of a responsibility as early adopters of this type of technologies to kind of set the standards in terms of data privacy and security. Let's talk a little bit about that as well. What do you think is the right way from a data privacy and security perspective to implement this? Because we all agree that this is a powerful technology that can do a lot of good, but can also impact the employee experience in a very negative manner if implemented with a big brother approach, right? Or similar approach.
So can I just, before I answer that question, there's a few things you mentioned. Can I comment on those?
Please.
So I think one of the reasons one topic, why people analytics, I said, the right people analytics folks who think about this from a perspective and a purpose perspective, from a purpose point of view, is because for AI, right, they're the ones who've been thinking and trying to convince everyone that we need to make data-informed decision-making.
Yep.
They've been thinking about workflows that even people management where it is difficult to be data-oriented, but at least use data to equip someone, and then intuition and human intuition can, on top of it, make a judgment. They've been thinking about it and it's not been happening, right? And now you have a technology coming in that says the prerequisite is you need to have data-informed decision-making. You need to think about your workflows. So it sort of unlocks these folks, and they can either choose to do it with an HR or join the AI transformation workforce, task force, and do it for everyone, right? So it's sort of I think the people analytics person has been the one, sort of you see in a movie, right? Someone who's in our organization, who's no one's been listening to, right? And they want to change the ideas, but when a crisis happens, they're normally sitting at the end of a boardroom and everyone's telling them, don't speak up, you're going to lose your job. He's I'm going to speak up, right? You see that in Hollywood. I think this is the moment where you can get unlocked. I think what you're just talking about, all of that sounds great, but one thing is missing. If you don't have the right, it's a fine line. If you don't have the right culture and the right vision set from the top, what you just explained, so let's walk through that onboarding, right? Let's say you and I, we connected because an agent said. Agent asked you, do you want to connect with him? You both have some similarities. You said yes, but if it turned out that if you said no, and end of the day, your boss came in and said, hey,
But then I would identify another mentor. No?
I saw a report that said you declined it. Or whoever says the most yes, right, gets valued somewhere, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I gotta say yes. But you can choose to like be a complete jerk when you're chatting with me. You're just doing it as a check the list item, right? So that's one.
Well, but there's the concept of the person, the body being selected, being an informal leader, right? That if that person hasn't been identified by their peers as somebody that is providing inspiration, personal support, technical support, sharing information, that person is not gonna be proposed as a mentor in the first place.
Not necessarily. I could be an introvert, I could be a subject matter expert, and I may not be the most popular person around the team, but to get that help, the AI should be identifying, hey, if you want to get this thing solved. So for example, there's an ONA expert sitting somewhere.
Yeah.
You want to learn basics about ONA, go talk to them. That person mostly is not like is very reserved, let's say, right, as an example. If you have the culture set that people, regardless of whether they're introverts or not, they help others because they're thinking about the broader team focus, that can happen without technology. This technology does help you in making it better, but it needs to have the right leadership incentive. It's the same way as employee listing, right, survey. It's anonymized, but you know that 30 out of 100 people did not reply. And if a leader comes in and says, hey, who did not reply to this survey? You've now lost the essence of the survey.
Yeah.
But if the leader sets up that, okay, folks, I need this to be as high participation as possible because I am going to use that to come back and make 3 commitments to solve something for you, right? So it's about like that trust and psychological safety. So one, do you have the right incentives or not? That's one. Number 2, a big fear. I was at a session recently with few VCs around what are they afraid of, especially in the financial services business. It's very similar to consulting as well, very similar to engineering, right? There's an apprenticeship model where you go in, you reach out to someone for help, you take someone senior, you sort of like shadow them, you may do some of the grunt work for them. If you're in consulting, you may be making all the slides, right, before agents came in. Or financial services, it's not about the analysis you can run. It is picking up cues that someone senior with experience has figured out, right? And you learn from them. Something that's not in the data, it's just their read of the market. And now if you take the junior folks away, right, number 1, you're losing that apprenticeship model. Similarly, if you have an agent that is recommending and enforcing your chat with someone, right? Enforcing is a key word. If the culture is enforcing, you haven't built the skill of saying, I need help, I need to figure out who the people are, I need to reach out to those people, connect.
Super interesting.
So it's the same way as like, if you go watch, you can watch a movie, this is a beautiful room, have like the whole wall be the cinema and watch it at home on Netflix. But if you actually watch that same movie in a theater, there's a experience that you're feeling right there. You left your house, you got in, bought really expensive popcorn and soda and candy, sat in there. You learning to reach out to people, that itself is a skill set that you want to learn, right? I'll give a real example for like a decade ago.
I love that insight because I had always thought, and we had to wrap up already because we've been here for more than 2 hours telling you, right? But I love that insight because I had always thought about AI agents, about enabling collaborative freedom at scale, right? By being able to integrate the social capital metrics. But you bring up a very important concept, right? There is the same way, for example, that ChatGPT is making us forget how to write emails, right? Or how to communicate with authenticity. Maybe AI agents, by automatically connecting us with certain people, can make us forget the skill of going and reaching out when we need help, right? And to actually create those cross-functional connections across the organization. So it has some positive connotations and negative connotations, but I still think that establishing a framework where these technologies operate can really set the incentives in one direction or another.
Oh, absolutely. So I think these are absolutely powerful. I think you should be, even as an individual, even if your company hasn't deployed, there's a lot of it available consumer grade right now, where you could use to connect with people, you could use to figure out onboarding, right? There is, I think the framework starts with your leadership. What are you trying to solve for, right? When I talk about prosperity, right? What does success look like? And is there a culture, have you made that transparent? So for example, if an employee, we're talking about onboarding. Let's say you have an agent that is about collaborating everyone on a project, and you need to deliver X by this time. Great. But if it becomes that, hey, the agent's going to ask you, and if you didn't reply, immediately it's going to go up as an escalation, right? It drives a different agenda, right? Or different culture, right? Where you're just submitting stuff for the sake of submitting stuff. I think the framework has to be, what is it that the outcome you're trying to solve for? And then do we have the right culture so that we're having that human and AI collaboration optimized for that outcome? So for instance, 2 years ago, advising a team that had figured out that they had 13 handovers before a software product feature could be released, right? They realized that they could do it with just one handoff, like when they built an agent in there. But I knew from that team had huge issues from their psychological safety and well-being perspective. They felt lonely post-pandemic. Thing is, when we started in a focus group, asked them, it turned out that some of the handoffs were very critical for people to feel human, right? So there's it was a necessary friction that they needed. Where just chatting with someone gave them something meaningful, right? So I think if you had designed that, hey, we want to just solve everything faster, you're now leaving with employees that they will not do it long term, right? But if you also did, hey, we'll do faster, but we'll also balance it out that we make sure that it's meaningful for you. It's the same way that the developer satisfaction metric, right, is set up not just on the speed of producing code, it is also based on employee satisfaction. And we know that you gotta hit around 70% satisfaction, right? To make sure that there's a right balance, else people will burn out. You can easily say, no, screw satisfaction, just produce as much as you can. The Valley did not, right? Because the Valley knew we would start losing talent because it's not going to be sustainable for them. So I agree, this is really powerful. The framework, I think, right now is too much focused on the end work output.
Okay.
I think there's a team outcome. And I love Hackman's model for teams. I used it to design my team. I use it to change my team and build followership for my team, as like really well, right? There's 3 success outcomes for a team. 1, whatever it's supposed to produce for a customer, the customer is overly satisfied. Number 2, the team grows as a result of the work that they do. And number 3, the individual grows, right? And growth comes with pain as well, grows as a result of being on this team. And if you're not solving for all 3, right, you don't have a long-term sustaining, effective team that can self-govern itself as well, even when the leader is not involved. So I think that is the key, that the framework has to be not just the work outcome, but what is the people outcome that we're driving for.
Amazing. Love that model. I have to learn more about that. And I feel honestly that we could talk about this for hours and hours. I had a list here of 10 questions in the iPad. I didn't even look at it once. Okay. And I would say probably, we could just share some final thoughts to wrap up the session, right? And leave the audience with the final thoughts. And, again, hopefully we'll have you again here soon, because I feel that we've touched so many different topics that we could just talk for hours and hours on each of these topics, right? And
4-hour podcast.
Yes, definitely marathon, like hackathon podcast, right? But maybe do you want the audience to leave with some specific thoughts on what we had discussed today, something they can bring home, right? And we've touched some powerful insights today that we will then, put into snippets, right? And deliver. But what do you think is the 2-3 things that the audience should take from today's conversation?
I think number 1, your as humans, we know there's a loneliness pandemic, right?
Correct.
It's well understood right now, right? People are craving connecting with other humans. So we try to operate in different communities. The communities don't necessarily need to be in the place that you work. You can find communities at work, but try to go out and be in multiple communities. Because you will find some meaning or some shared purpose there. You will also learn to operate in a distributed network yourself, number one. I think if you haven't, I think most people are doing that, but if you haven't, you should build that. Why? Because that is going to be a prerequisite that as you play with AI, companies are, do I have a belief that companies are going to solve for their employees' prosperity? Absolutely not. Nada, zero, like cipher. And for that, you need to skill yourself to play with AI and not think about AI as a tool, think about it as a team member. And then lastly, for you to work with it, don't just think about how it makes you faster, productive in the work that you're doing. Think about what else of meaning that you could not do within your domain, right? That wasn't possible without AI, right? And so now with AI, can you go further and deeper? And if you're a domain expert, you actually will be the best runner of AI, because that's where this future is headed. The future is going to be a networked aggregation of micro communities.
Okay.
The people who are going to be really valued are going to be subject matter experts who can build on top of AI. And for the subject matter expert, for you to design a purposeful life is use AI to go deeper and further into what was not possible before. This is not just a Star Trek or Star Wars like fantasy. You and I have already built companies using this concept where we didn't need to have full-time employees. It's a network of experts and leveraging AI combined with experts to see, okay, how can we scale our outcome? That's already happening, it's just going to happen more.
Amazing. So learn to work in distributed networks, leverage AI to provide more actionable and meaningful impacts, right? And basically embracing the power of communities. Yeah. I would summarize it like that. And I agree with you on all those, right? At CTS, we're embracing this to some extent with the creation of the global extended team, with consultants, ambassadors. And you really represent exactly that mentality that I think is the network first future of work, right? Where you care about what you do, purpose is important for you, but also, you make sure that you have the right level of subject matter expertise and discipline to not only have passion, but provide actually something that is meaningful and tangible, right? Because we can talk about these topics and get very abstract, but at the end of the day, it's about how we crystallize and materialize these ideas into actual technology that impacts people's life at scale. For me, the main takeaway really would be the concept of collaborative freedom, again, right? So we all know that the traditional way of work is being transformed in real time in front of our eyes. And you don't need to be in people analytics to care about this. You can be a person that is starting to go into the workforce, a person that is maybe thinking about retiring from the workforce, right? And how is my future going to look like? Or just somebody that your industry has become impacted by AI and you're thinking about where do I go next, right? So just be aware of what is the trend, because we don't know exactly how the future of work is going to look like, but we know that it's going to be about networks, we know that it's going to be about AI, we know that it's going to be about decentralization, and we know that it's going to be about purpose and communities, right? So I agree with you. Start familiarizing yourself with that mindset. There are some elements of the entrepreneurial mindset, right? Having accountability, working on something that you care about. Because if you don't work about something you care about, you are not going to be competitive enough to survive in this new reality. So it's not even a matter of just quality of life, it's a matter of pure survival, right? And I think honestly, I'm so happy that I can have this discussion with you. I think that, at least, look, at least all the synergy that we're creating with the community, this is worth it. This is the right way to go. So thank you very much, Shujaat, for coming here today. And looking forward to continue to collaborating on all these projects.
Thank you. And I will say what you said, a term that just hit me, collaborative freedom. I think I love that term. And I think collaborative freedom is what the reality is going to be in the networks. I think use that to figure out how can you do creative freedom as well for yourself. And that eventually will lead you to more career freedom as well, where you can design a portfolio for career. Love
100%.
it. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you, Shujaat.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice fun.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.